Get me out of the way. Want me to where heaven is. Get me out the way. Want me to where heaven is. Yeah. Get me out of the way. Want me to where heaven is. Get me out the way. Want me to where heaven is. Yeah.
Morality. But that shirt is awfully flesh tone.
You don't have a headset on.
Coming up tonight, we take a look at the first episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Then after that, it's going to be a nice long deep dive into Foundation, book versus the TV series.
Dude, why do I feel like
All
you should
this
be
coming
flying
up
a
right
helicopter
now
with
on
Fortunate
The
Son
Writer
playing?
Brothers.
For the record, you know that American helicopters only have 2 settings for Fortunate Son.
And welcome back to your Tuesday night home for movies, games, shows, and books, past, present, and future. My name is Petey York. I'm your host, and I am, of course, joined by most of our wonderful guests from the Star Wars special, Chris and Devil Cry 3. It's good to have you both back. You guys provided a lot of great discussion. We actually got 33 views just on the YouTube alone from that, so yeah, obviously you guys were probably helping us do something right, but you also were excited to possibly come back again anyway, so it works out for everybody. But Corione, how are you doing this week, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Survived the weekend fairly well. Saw some new shows. Got to see some interesting takes on some old ones, and looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, same here. Poya Zapatos, how's your day going so far?
Pretty good. Not too much going on. Just ready to discuss Foundation for sure. Just finished the book. Pretty excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to getting in. We got a couple of good topics. We usually have 2 topics tonight, but we've got a long discussion, I think, ahead of us between the first episode of Strange New Worlds and Foundation. But before we get to that, Chris, welcome back again. Glad to have you here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks. I've had a good week. A couple of channels in the pop culture community decided they like karaoke, so they started doing karaoke nights alongside their usual content of pop culture discussion.
Right on.
So, I was on with Tom a couple of times. That was kind of fun because I've been watching him lots on Midnight's Edge, and it was fun just singing with him. And I'm glad to be back here and actually talk about Strange New Worlds and Foundation.
Well, hopefully we haven't tapped you out too hard on the subject. I know it gets a little redundant. You share the same thoughts over and over, but that's also how you build credibility with consistency. So if you say the same thing a few times, then people know, okay, he's not just snaking into groups, saying what he's trying to say to get along with people. No, he's genuine. He has his own opinion. So that's hopefully that works. Hopefully it's the same. I don't know. I missed the other show, so
I'm having a lot of fun with getting into the whole streaming experience.
Yeah, so. Me too. I definitely I love it when people ask me to even if it's just whether it's a small show or a big show. It's like, oh, you want me? I'm so special. All of a sudden, and of course, our other guest panelist today, Mr. Devil Cry 3. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I mean, reality is, Kiss was probably the one that brought those, 20, 30-some people last time. I just talk a lot. I'm doing all right, though. Watched me a little bit of both shows last few days.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. So with that, why don't we go ahead and let's see, who is among us probably the least knowledgeable when it comes to Star Trek? Do we think?
I might be. Like, I know a little. Like, I don't know a ton.
All right.
But I
Well,
know
why
a
don't you
little
go
bit.
ahead and start with your thoughts then on Strange New Worlds?
Well,
What you thought overall?
Well, like I said, I only know a little bit as far as Star Trek's concerned. I had an uncle who was really into it, so like when I was younger, I watched a little bit of Star Trek here and there because I was one of the only people who would watch it with him. Everyone in his family wasn't into it. It was weird, but I mean, from what I saw in it, I enjoyed it. I mean, there's only having seen, I believe it was only the one episode I could find there. It's hard to judge how a show's gonna go based off of a episode. Like I said, I enjoyed it. It was interesting take on a few things. It progressed well. Like as a show is concerned, it was an enjoyable episode to watch. As far as Star Trek lore goes, it's kind of hard for me to put too much input on that. I did like the dilemma that Pike had throughout the episode, though.
Yeah, well, and that's why I
As a
wanted
driving
to. That's
force.
why I wanted you to go first, because I wanted to get the opinion out there first, like from somebody who's maybe not as familiar with Trek, to properly, because I can try to set myself out of the series as much as I can, right? But the thing is, I will always have a certain bias one way or the other because I am a huge fan of Star Trek. I've been following this stuff. I mean, I grew up on Star Trek. I grew up on Star Wars. Those are probably my two main sci-fi lores. So the reason that, you bring a unique perspective with that because you've kind of watched it here and there, but now you have more of an open mind to properly gauge it as a show as well. And that's kind of that's something that we're trying to do here is we want to be able to look at stuff from a bit more of an objective standpoint, not just a personal. While personal is very important when giving our opinions, we also want to be able to, okay, can we recognize the art of the process? Because to bring up another controversial topic, Doctor Who. A lot of people say that, the first female Doctor was bad. Some people say that. I don't hold it against Jodie Whittaker. In fact, I only hold the derogatory term is chin balls. I only hold it against that particular individual because, well, he's the one responsible for the failure of the 13th Doctor. Jodie Whittaker actually contacted David Tennant for advice on how to do the character. So she obviously wasn't the issue there. But everyone's going to have a different opinion on that because of how much they're attached to that particular lore. And so the same applies to Star Trek. Like, there's definitely a lot of controversy with the way that Kurtzman's been handling Star Trek, and it's totally justified. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of Discovery or Star Trek Picard, or as it's been coined in the sort of counterculture fan base, the Star Trek puke hard, which the show does absolutely puke hard. But I don't like to just assume that because maybe the studio's done some things wrong, because at the end of the day, Star Trek isn't just Alex Kurtzman. It's the writers, it's all the actors, it's all the music, and it's everything. And so to help kind of bring that more unique perspective, we do like having people who aren't as familiar. And in our later topic, Chris didn't even read Foundation, so he's going to be able to give us an opinion on his ideas on how he thought the show went. But with that, why don't we go ahead and get another opinion? Corione, I have not heard your thoughts entirely. I read your Facebook post, so that kind of was like, all right, so we'll probably be in agreement a little bit. But go ahead and give us your rundown on Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, the way I like to describe this first episode of Strange New Worlds is it's that girl at the club that looks amazing, and you would 100% take her to a hotel, but you would never take her home. I guess is the best way to put it.
That's one way to put it.
Right. I mean, so I liked the general plotting of the episode. I thought The story point beats, especially for the dilemma Pike was facing, were actually good. It felt Star Trek-like. I liked his solution to the problem. That seemed good. I liked how the characters interacted with each other. I thought that was solid. The problems, though, are we're seeing a couple of things. One is it's fruit of the poison tree. Discovery starts this, and Discovery, and Discovery's kind of the prequel series to this Strange New Worlds, and it's just not good. And them coming back and referencing it is not great. They've ignored a great deal of the canonical lore. There were some other things that were just weird choices, like, when did Spock go to the gym that hard? Like, dude looks like Captain America Spock, right? Like, I don't get it. I didn't get the, Vulcans have a thing, I mean, it's quite heavy in the lore where they're only mating every 7 years. Neither of those characters looked like they were in the mood to be doing that, and yet here we go with a very sexy scene. Didn't make a lot of sense to the lore. The ship dressing, look, I grew up in the Zimmerman era of Star Trek internal ship design, where that's Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, all of that was done by Zimmerman, and he did a great job. Because everything felt like it was actually on a ship. I don't know how many of you guys have actually served on ships. Everything is compact. Everything is designed to use the minimum amount of space necessary for it to function. You don't have the captain having a room the size of a bar, right? You don't have the bridge be this massive sprawling thing that you could probably play football in. And you certainly wouldn't have the transporter room, look like it could host a rave. It's just, it would not be how things are done. So there are problems. I don't think they're insurmountable problems. The other problem I had was one of the characters has the last name Noonien Singh, which anybody who understands the lore of Star Trek would equate Noonien Singh to Stalin or Mao or that really, really mean, nasty guy from World War II. So you wouldn't hear somebody come on, like, everybody who had that last name changed their last name very shortly after this person's reign. You're not going to have somebody come up to you and go, "Hi, my name is Bob Stalin. How you doing?" Right? Like, it doesn't happen. So the fact that this person kept that last name and everyone just seems to be fine with it and not uncomfortable with the fact that, they probably lost a fair number of, grandparents and what have you to the machinations of this very evil man, feels weird. And it feels like they grabbed the name just for the very, very casual fans who are only vaguely acquainted with the lore to go into. Now, there may be good reasons for this. I'm really hoping they give her a good origin, good background episode to tell us why this character seems like they have no problem with the name. But until we get that, I have concerns. I think there's a good chance for this series. I want to give it a second episode and see how it goes. If they refine it, if it gets better, if it gets more original Trek-like, I'll stick with it. But they've given me enough that I'm interested to see what they keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's I definitely feel the same on the fact that it's a promising start. But I'll give my feedback in a second. Chris, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you thought about Strange New Worlds?
Sure. I'll start by just quickly mentioning my background in Star Trek for context. It was more than Star Wars. It was what I grew up with, although I certainly was a fan of both. I started on the Next Generation, and I watched especially the Next Generation and DS9 multiple times, Voyager and Enterprise to a degree, and also the original series through. Basically saw everything multiple times, to be fair. And then I got into fan films, and I started to dig deep into how much there was there and just how amazing fan films were becoming. So naturally, when fan films were canceled around the time of Axanar, that completely it just derailed me from Star Trek altogether. And to be honest, ever since that happened, I just stopped. I just came full stop, and I haven't watched anything new that's been made after that. I haven't even watched anything made by CBS, period, since that happened. It just broke me from that whole company, to be honest. So I don't have the context of what Discovery or Picard are like. And coming into the show today, I gave Strange New Worlds a chance to watch that first episode. So my principal takeaway is, how do I contend with the idea that, okay, if this was a show that was a brand new IP, never mind Star Trek, if they were just telling a science fiction story with brand new characters, with maybe some Star Trek themes, versus the fact that I'm being asked to contend with the fact that I do know the original series characters and what the canon is behind that, it's very difficult for me to make some kind of peace with that, because I mean, Spock, even if I suspend my disbelief that they would kiss in public and then they would go back to the room and light candles and all that, I mean, he didn't put a shirt on before answering the phone call. It's like that just completely derailed me. I had to stop watching the episode for almost an hour at that point. Because I was just like, no, Spock would put a shirt on and then answer the call. He would do it. He would do it properly, and he would button it up with a purpose. And then I really started taking notes after that. But I guess the bottom line is, so I don't go on too long all at once, is that I do think it was okay if it's its own thing. But as contending with the characters and canon that I know, it was impossible to like.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not. It is by no means perfect, and it's definitely got some growth to do. I think when it comes to Discovery, I don't think there's going to be any. Even if Kurtzman was fired, I think it would be kind of unrealistic to expect them to just completely ignore those stories. Now, can they maybe reference them a little less? Can they maybe do just kind of slowly phase away from it and just slowly forget about it? Sure, absolutely. And I think that's kind of why this episode was tied to it, was just a reminder, like, hey, we're not throwing out our old canon, but we are just going to kind of, it's going to kind of be the motivator for our first episode, and then we're going to hopefully move on from there. So I do think it's the Trek usually used to have in Star Trek the 3-season rule, right? Because the first 3 seasons, you kind of were patient with to so the shows could find their ground. The first 3 seasons of TNG, it's got some good ones in there. It's got some not so good ones in there. DS9, Voyager. Can't really say the same for Enterprise, because it finally kind of started to find its stride about season 2, season 3, and then season 4 it was hitting all the right numbers, and then they canceled it. So I think with this, though, I would go with the 3-episode rule to start. And personally, I like it so far, but I'll get into my thoughts after John shares his thoughts.
Yeah, for Strange New Worlds, I think I'm a lot closer to Brandon in my understanding of Star Trek, even though I grew up with it and watched it a lot, and I certainly enjoyed it. I always thought of it as the more higher echelon of sci-fi that always seemed more for like when I knew more about physics, and if I ever decided to learn about space, I would care more for it. So I didn't really get into Star Trek a whole lot as I became an adult until the J.J. Abrams trilogy, or 2 of 3 trilogy, that series. And back when those came out, I loved them visually, but I rewatched them recently and they don't hold up past visually, and especially in terms of story writing. So that was really a bummer. Then I also watched a little bit of Picard. Then I watched a little bit of Discovery. I had a lot of fun with Discovery in terms of that amount of sci-fi in TV. Like, it's been a while, aside from like The Expanse, there's very few TV shows with a ton of sci-fi with mature people rather than just kids, like Lost in Space on Netflix. So I enjoyed getting back into it, but I 100% fell out with the Discovery as soon as I got into it. Like, as soon as I took 1 day break from it, I forgot about it until we brought it up a few weeks ago. With Strange New Worlds, though, I thought it was really fun. I'm really disappointed, though, to hear that like it didn't hold up to, you know, basic canon. That's something that seems to be a really major flaw. I don't understand why it seems so hard for people not to just go back and like collect the data that they own for an IP. And especially in terms of like fans, like more fans can talk louder than ever before, and yet it still seems like nobody is writing to fans anymore. They're just writing to make new fans for a week or 2. And that's been really disappointing. But I really did like this episode. I thought this is a fun episode. I think it's a fun show, and I'm actually excited for how far it goes. I am worried, though, if it's going to go in a more negative direction. If it does fall along the lines of Star Trek Discovery in terms of falling out of favor right after the first episode. But we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, I personally didn't have a whole lot of issues with this show myself, but I guess I have a different level of patience with this. So, but a little bit of background. So, in my opinion, I think the 3 best Star Trek movies, if we're just going to discuss movies, are the motion picture, Star Trek 6, and Star Trek Beyond. And the reason I put Beyond up there is because I felt Justin Lin managed to come in and actually take what had already been set, and he gave us a proper, the first ever TOS movie that was actually true to form to the original series. Motion picture does a better job of staying true to the Star Trek idea and Gene's original vision. TOS had a good mix of quirkiness and silliness with the character bonding and the character moments that the original series, that I felt that a lot of the motion picture films kind of lost. And so that's why I put Beyond up so high, is because, well, for one, Justin Lin was actually a Star Trek fan, finally working on a Star Trek show, and he did a pretty good job giving us a pretty decent movie. Now, no, it's not, the greatest as far as story, but when you really compare it to a lot of the other Star Trek movies, especially ones like 5, and I mean, while 3 is good in its own right, it's not quite motion picture good. It's kind of a filler movie. And then, of course, the Next Generation films, just none of them really hold up that well. I don't even think First Contact is as good as people make it out to be. But that's a discussion for another time. So that's why, going into this, I liked Season 1 of Discovery. I'll probably never watch it again, but I think it's at least worth watching once. You can tell about most of the way through the series where they fired Brian Fuller and brought in Kurtzman because the writing quickly degrades fast. The whole plot twist in Season 1 I really enjoyed, and then I, of course, enjoyed the first half of Season 2, and Anson Mount is the whole reason why I was going to give Strange New Worlds a shot in the first place. So, to address some of the points that you guys brought up, and your points are valid, I'm not saying that you're wrong for having an opinion, don't get me wrong. I'm just going to say that, so the first one, the big one, the biggest offense throughout all of Star Trek, and this isn't just a Strange New Worlds problem, this happened with Enterprise as well, is the technological canon changes. I understand that in an ideal world, we'd want the technology to be what we're familiar with. DS9, The Trials and Tribulations, which is probably one of the best Star Trek episodes ever, did a very good job of keeping true to the original series and splicing in the DS9 character. This is just one of the greatest Star Trek moments in all of Trek. And a lot of love was put into that, and you can tell because they rebuilt the original Enterprise. They had the sets, they had the lighting, they had the colors down, and so that was a proper homage to the original series. Now we've kind of moved in, and so when Enterprise came out, though, the technology looked a little more updated compared to what was in the 23rd century, and I remember people griping about that, like, oh, it looks too new, looks too modernized. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that our own technology in our timeline, in our universe, so to speak, has progressed. And that's in no small part because of Star Trek. When Kirk flips open his communicator the first time, or whoever flips open their communicator the first time, that was an idea that didn't exist before, until somebody decided to make that into, and then we went through the flip phone phase. Now we have touchscreen phones, now we already have pads. So it's like, so our technology has changed. So it's from a production standpoint, it can be hard to want to justify keeping the technology more older looking, because it's like, oh, we already have this stuff. There's nothing new about the communicator. Well, the communicator's still relatable because people do miss their flip phones. But that's just one example of the technology evolving and changing. As the technology progresses, I've noticed that in every Star Trek series or movie, they kind of try to make it more advanced versions of the stuff that we have in the era that it's written. And so, Corion, you bring up a valid point about the original series being based off of 60s era warships. And that's exactly what they were. That's how they were crewed. That's how they were standard. Warships aren't designed that way anymore. The one I served on, the Coast Guard Cutter Bertolf, while I was serving in the Coast Guard, we actually had 6-man staterooms as standard crew berthing. To put that into perspective, your average stateroom is going to be like 30 or 40, people to a small confined living space. So we actually had almost like actual crew quarters on the ship. And even the captain's quarters, I mean, for her, it was basically a small apartment on the water. And so the living situation and even the underway living environments, even on the new aircraft carriers, they now have small convenience stores on those things now, and they have full-on Subways and Starbuckses. It's amazing how much ship life has evolved in just since the 60s. So for me, having had that perspective being on the boat, seeing them kind of go with the more TNG style Enterprise with this show didn't really bother me that much, and it didn't surprise me. Yeah, it does seem a bit kind of out of place, because yes, now this is a prequel before TOS era. The way I see it is it's just a different visual representation, because I think if the story's there, you could probably just kind of in your mind just imagine it being more on an original series style Enterprise. And so I don't. It just doesn't bother me. Is really what I'm saying. But that's a personal opinion, and that's all. That's all I'm sharing is just my perspective and saying that. Yeah, I wasn't bothered by it, but I can see that. Okay, yeah, it is. It's like, okay, why is it that we go from now we're gonna go from luxury yacht back to battleship and then back to luxury yacht and then in TNG. So I can understand. I understand where you're coming from. Is what I'm saying. I'm just saying, for me, I could kind of overlook it. Story-wise, I felt that this was finally a proper, true to form, original series story. And I mean like Balance of Terror original series, not Spock's Brain or Naked Time, which it also seems a lot of Star Trek fans forget exist. I don't know why. Is it just me, or does it seem like some fans, whenever they bring up the original series, it's like they think, oh yeah, Balance of Terror, the best one ever, which, yeah, it's up there. But the cheese is still there, guys. The bad episodes will never go away. And I think it's important to, keep that in mind because, yes, while this episode did have some silly moments overall, again, I don't hate any of the characters. I like all of them. And Corian, you did bring up a very valid point at Security Chief Noonien Singh's last name. That's going to be a little odd. Especially now, that just makes Space Seed even worse because, first of all, Star Trek 2, he shows up and he says, "Oh, I never forget a face." And so it's like, well, Chekhov wasn't there during Space Seed as far as we know, so he must have been reading the crew manifest. Now he's going to be reading the crew manifest and he's going to see a Noonien Singh served on the Enterprise at some point. So, yeah, that one definitely gets a bad hit for that. I liked the character. I didn't mind the whole horrible backstory or whatever. I thought they actually delivered that pretty well and in a believable way. And actually somebody, I think I got into it with somebody on one of the other groups because I was like, Deep Space Nine had some pretty harsh backstory for Kira Nerys, okay? It's not that it's really not that far-fetched to have a character that's got a rough past. And again,
I would also say that Nerys's backstory, when you look at it through post 9/11 eyes, takes on a totally different meaning.
Yeah, and that story was in the pre-9/11 world. So, yeah, I felt the characters were good. I felt the pacing was good. I felt the overall message was very good. Some people insist it's one-sided politically one way or the other. I didn't see it that way at all. I know they showed footage from a certain event that took place in the United States. Well, they also showed a bunch of riot footage too, so I felt it was a very middle ground message calling out both sides. I mean, Pike even says competing ideas of liberty, and it's like, it's a reminder, it's a warning that we really do have the opportunity to control our destiny. We do have the opportunity to realize, okay, we really don't need to blow each other up with warp bombs. And we can settle things with debate and discourse. And that, I think, is a really good message to put out there. And I think that's, I've said it before on a couple of other mediums, and I'll just say it here on the stream. Even if the author, I think it was Akiva Goldsmith, who's the primary writer for the show, he went back and he actually rewatched the original series before he started writing this showdown. And so if Roddenberry's original series influences even just 50% of this show, then that's good enough for me, because then it's going to take all of these so-called Trekkies or new Trek fans, or however you want to call them, it's going to get Roddenberry's message to them finally. And that's really, I think, what matters in the end on how this show goes, is that if we get people to start thinking more and talking more and at least hearing the original ideas that Roddenberry had, even if it's repackaged in this newer format, then I think the show is good enough for me. But that's just my take. I mean, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to Thursday. I really love the opening credits. I may or may not have watched them by themselves a few times just before I went and played Star Trek Online. So, but yeah. So that's my feedback. If anyone wants to make a counterpoint, Chris?
I'll certainly be interested to see how they deal with the mood of the idealism of the Federation. How much it truly is like the original ideal society, or how corrupt it is. Because what I did note when I was watching the episode, there's that moment where Anson says, "Join the Federation," as though this is a wonderful and beautiful and ideal thing. And then moments later, we see a scene where they're sitting, at a table together, talking about how, there weren't any more serious repercussions with taking care of the situation in the way they did, going through a loophole. And I got that little bit of a vibe in my head, like, oh, hey, the Federation's really corrupt and there's bad things going on there, and it's not really as ideal as it seems. And, as tempting as it is from a dramatic standpoint to go down that path, it also kind of strips away the beauty of the moment where Anson Mount can stand in that debate room and say, join the Federation. You know, we have resolved all our issues. We are living in peace, but not really.
I would comment on that one, Chris. Just that one, if you don't mind, real quick. The way that he discussed the loophole is it wasn't with anybody outside of Starfleet, and it was more in terms of covering his and his team's like reputation. So it wasn't so much as a loophole in terms of navigating the law. It was like because he was there at the events that occurred, he knew that nobody wanted to talk about or take responsibility for those events, and because of that, he was able to justify what he declared as second contact. So it wasn't so much like skirting the law, it was more covering themselves. Just in like it really seemed like they took the time to be very delicate with his version of breaking the rules. He wasn't willy-nilly about it, even though he said he was. Like, he knew more, and the whole show, like the whole episode seemed to like lead to him knowing more. And then in that moment he explained himself towards the end.
Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't judge how they're going to follow through on that in one episode. Certainly, you know, that would see how that plays out over a season or several for that matter. But I do kind of like I did get a sense of that they are trying maybe a little bit to follow that original idealism.
I hope so.
And I hope that plays out. Whether or not I can agree with other factors, you know, like I mentioned before, existing characters and existing canon. I would like to see them try and actually follow through on the idealism a bit. You know, more than letting it get into, you know, corruption.
Yeah. I mean, DS9 has a whole two-parter, Paradise Lost, that does a very great job of exploring some of that Starfleet corruption. And I think, you know, I don't know. If we do decide to go that route, I hope it's not at least until like season 2 or 3, because those are... It does feel like certain concepts that have already been explored in past Trek shows are probably going to be repackaged and explored in this one. And again, I got to look at this from all angles, right? Okay, yes, we could say that, oh, we already watched that in The Next Generation. Well, that's great. Current, new, especially younger fans of the current Star Trek iteration, they didn't. And sadly, probably aren't. And for the wrong reasons. However, if there's one thing growing up that I could never stand, actually, I don't even know about growing up, it's even today, it is that superiority complex that people can hold and gatekeep when it comes to fandoms. And it's like, oh, you know, I was an OG fan, so this is when it mattered. And it's like, sure, that may be true, but at the same time, what's more important? Holding on to those pearls or getting new fans into Star Trek? And if this is the show that gets more people curious about the original series and The Next Generation, great. That's what we want to see. And they might go back and be like, oh, hey, Strange New Worlds copied this. It's like, yes, they did. But you wouldn't have seen that concept otherwise. So, yeah, it's...
Well, I'd like to pose how much of it is repackaging and how much of it is the writer saying, I think I can do it better.
Well, and I should clarify too.
That?
I'm just making a guess based off of the this season on Strange New Worlds trailer, so I don't know for sure one way or the other. But I do think that's what we're going to see a lot of those original Star Trek concepts come up, and so yeah. But overall, I think the premise of the episode was fine. Not the greatest. I've seen some people bring up the whole, oh, they learned how to build a warp bomb from observing from a distance. Which it's like, okay, that does seem a little bit far-fetched until you go back to Star Trek First Contact. And you realize, well, the first warp engine was developed out of a nuclear missile. It's established they have nuclear capability. And also NASA has been developing a matter-antimatter engine. The only problem is the gamma radiation.
Well, and so let's not forget the old cliche, seeing is believing. right? Like a lot of science is theory, but when you see theory actually exercised, it's like, oh, there is an answer. The solution does exist. Okay,
Right.
now we'll find it.
Well, that's
Right.
I mean, when you go down that route, you even enter in a certain realm of like, you have to then think about like what reverse engineering is entailing, for example. So like especially if you look at say our modern day, what we have access to. If we saw a new weapon on a battlefield and we were able to get proper images of it, to where we could get a relatively accurate, say, sketch down of what it was, and we had video or seen it operate, your ability at that point to, which if I recall correctly, they had imagery and video of that space agent in action. You now know, all right, this is what it looked like when it's operating, this is what it's connected to, this is roughly what I believe this is functioning out of. How does that happen? And then you're theorizing down the road of how you make that happen. Our modern firearms are a little easier to do because we have a general understanding of like what has to happen to make that operate. But like when you have a visual reference, reverse engineering something, it doesn't have to be a one for one to do the same thing. And especially if you're just making a thing explode, and you're like, well, I know this has to pertain to this other thing. I don't need it to operate like an engine. It just needs to go bang. Like that's even more simpler than people realize. Like making things explode's not hard. Making things explode stably is hard, and not, accidentally making it explode, it can be difficult.
This is like if we got a whole new theory of like gravity theory came because we saw ships that were defying gravity, and we were 100% like proven that is a device that exists. Suddenly, a whole new school is going to be like sprung up from it that's going to have nothing to do with quantum or the other main theory string theory. Right. So like this would be like warp theory. Just shows up. You see warp exists. Now you know warp theory, but like atomic theory, only one section of atomic theory has anything to do with blowing up bombs. Right. So like warp theory is now the full field, but the government's gonna fund warp bomb theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
make the point of how that was weird.
Mm-hmm.
I'd even go farther to say that if we were observing, okay, let's say just right now, today, some interstellar traveler traveled through, right by Earth, realized we're here, went, oh crap, and then jumped back to light speed and got out of here. The amount of radio telescopes and everything else, we would point at that immediately and get any kind of reading we possibly could, and then sit down going, okay, how could we cause similar readings? Would be exactly what we would do. We would sit down and go, okay, in order to do that, they must be containing a matter and antimatter explosion in some fashion. Well, we know with our current understanding of matter, antimatter, you need some sort of magnetic bottle to hold the antimatter. And if they're reading some other emission that could point to how they're controlling that reaction, then suddenly things change, right? Things change a great deal because now we have that missing link that we didn't have previously that we can sit there and go, oh, that's how it's done. It's got to be the interaction of these following things in some fashion. So now we have all the Lego blocks. We don't necessarily have what the end product is supposed to look like, but we can get it close. And there's going to be governments that are going to say, if you can get it close enough to annihilate them, I will give you all the money to make that happen.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened here. It makes sense from a logical perspective. And, that's why I actually didn't even mention any of the technological stuff in the series. It looks more modern, and I accept that. I accept that. I can even go so far as to say, if Gene was alive today, and he was going to go, what visuals, what do I want the future to look like now that I have the tech available today? If that was the inspiration for how they did things, I have no problem with it at all. I have no problem with Gene, if he was alive, seeing cell phones and seeing Skype calls going, hey, you know, maybe we should build in some sort of connector for the communicator. So when I tap it into a console, it brings it up on screen. I have no problem with that. That makes sense to me, right? I have no problem with the bridge having an almost holographic-y kind of look instead of physical switches and dials, because at the time when they were working on it, they would have never conceived of like a flat panel touch display, right? But it makes sense to have in that reality, so I'm down with it. The stuff that loses me is, look, I know you've said that ships have gotten a little bit more expansive and whatnot, and 100% I'll buy that. Every Canadian ship I have been on has still got the utilitarian Spartan kind of design to it. So for me, that's where I'm basing it on. I also think that I've seen the inside of like luxury yachts. I have never seen a captain's area with that much, you know, awesome space. On top of that, look, yo man, a fireplace inside a ship.
Yeah.
Dude, space. If you ask any NASA engineer, the one thing they're actually really seriously afraid of happening on a spaceship is fire. And when you ask them what would happen if there was a fire on the ship, the response is everyone would die in a fire. Right? So seeing open flame like that is just jarring to me. Like,
I feel like that's a display of the technological advancement. Because, like, we have oxygen in our ships because that's the main thing we need to breathe. But, like, our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen.
Right. I mean, like, look, here's what I would say. I would even compromise and say, if at some point down the line, okay, they show it was actually holographic flames, and they weren't actually real, like it wasn't a real campfire, it was a holographic fire or something, I will completely withdraw my complaint and say that makes complete and total sense, and I'm 100% down with it.
Holographic flame wouldn't even be that crazy of an idea. Like, that's not even all that wild of an idea for us now.
We actually have that stuff now.
I definitely give you that. I didn't recall even seeing that. I may have been looking away because I did watch part of it while, like, I watched it toward the tail end of work. So there was a portion of the show where I was like off and on paying attention and just listening to what was going on. So like there might be aspects of that I would normally probably have cued in on because I like little details and stuff. But yeah, no, I would definitely agree with you on the fact of like if he has an open flame on a spaceship, that's wild. That's an interesting move. And you did bring up even, which I hadn't thought of, they would definitely be able to get a lot more, like, if that happened for us right now, we would get a lot more than pictures and video. We get all kinds of crazy readings from that. We would scrounge for every little minute detail possible, because it could be the key that is needed to make that progress. And by golly, if we were at a situation where a bomb was needed and we had that information, we would definitely skip straight to bomb, without a doubt. It's not even a question. And what I do like is in the show though, it with the crew, like that is a point of like confusion at first because they don't understand what's going on. Like, well, how did they get to bomb first? Like that's not the process for this. This is it's engine then bomb. How to get the bomb, and then they go down and they find out what's going on. They're like, oh well, now this starts to make sense now. Like now I understand how they got to bomb. Like this is really bad. But there's definitely. Oh, go ahead. I see you're trying to talk.
Sorry, I'm still trying to get in the flow of transitions, making it look nice. Keep
no, you're
the focus
good, man.
On everybody. Yeah, and So does anybody know, because I think this is something that maybe we should probably know, how exactly the Russians got the bomb? Like, has that ever been cleared up?
My understanding, based on the reading that I've done, because I've read a few books on the subject in like Manhattan Project history, was it was a combination of spies, readings from demolition sites, cooperation sort of with the post-Japanese government so they could get in and take a couple of readings, and watching and like observing the nuclear weapons tests. There was also a huge commission in the UN at around that time where everyone was once the UN was formed, one of the first things that got discussed was, US, you need to share your nuclear technology. And of course the US was like flat out no. But the fact that there was that much interest, you can imagine that they're going to sit there and they're going to, somebody's going to be, some geek in a lab coat is suddenly going to get a new Russian girlfriend. And they may not know it's necessarily a Russian girlfriend, but somebody is. Things are going to leak, right? The other part of it too was, okay, this is getting into areas that can't 100% be confirmed, but there's enough evidence to lead me to believe it. There is a lot of discussion saying that the German scientists who were working on the Germans' version of a nuclear device had more or less got everything ready to go to testing phase, but absolutely refused to because they didn't want the German military to have that kind of weaponry because they knew it would be used. And they were terrified of the consequences of that being used. Only about half of the German scientists were brought over to the US through Operation Paperclip. The other half weren't. It's entirely plausible that some of them wound up in Russian hands.
I actually was going to say, like, the one piece of note that I was going to say I thought I recalled was that literally what you're just talking about, and that I don't remember where I read it because I've read a lot of different things. In high school, I did a report on the atom bomb, along with I forget the two bombs' names because my memory's garbage. But
Fat Man and Little Boy.
Fat Man and Little Boy. I always want to call them the opposites. I could have swore I remember reading about how Russia had made a point about getting some of those scientists, because I recall reading or hearing about exactly what you're talking about, where supposedly they were either very close or pretty much had figured it out but hadn't done it, and that we as well as Russia had pulled from that pool of personnel, and that I thought that's pretty heavily part of what led to that as well. So
yeah, that's what justified Operation Mockingbird, which is the CIA's operation of recruiting Nazi scientists.
Operation
And
Paperclip.
that was during the East-West Berlin when the wall was up.
Mockingbird's another discussion for another show.
Well,
the reason I was asking that was because some of the complaints I've seen circulated are that, they got a warp bomb just by observing, and it's like, that's kind of how things happen. We didn't get to the first airplane by having somebody show up and say, oh, here's a plane and this is how it works, and they taught us. No, we watched the birds. For hundreds of years, man has watched the birds and has done everything that we can to try to mimic their flight, and finally, it took hold. And then from there, it's just every idea that snowballs from that. We're not going to achieve space travel, at least right now, in our lifetime, without coming up with ideas and observing the results. And so it's not that far-fetched for me to accept that premise that in that close vicinity where they had that big battle and they had all those warp signatures, it's literally going to be that guy in Independence Day who's sitting at a listening post and nothing's going on, and then he's going to get that one beep, and then he's going to be like, okay, that's weird, and he's going to get another beep, and he's going to get more, and then all of a sudden, the satellites are picking up all this energy going on, and it's going to be finally his life is no longer wasted, or her life, if it's a female that's observing the stars. And so, no, it's not that hard to believe that they did that they were able to pick up on their tech and quickly reverse engineer it, especially if they were in fact a pre-warp civilization, which they were like right on the verge. They were just busy trying to blow each other up.
Yeah,
so,
let's acknowledge that they're represented as very similar to us. Like, they had giant flat screens in every single area, and they were like built into the walls. That's something we have yet to get to. right? Because like our TVs degrade too quickly over time. So if we're going to build them into our walls, they need to last longer. And
Well,
that's
and this
something
is-
this society had achieved.
This is the other thing that also goes along with it is just because a society might evolve similarly to Earth doesn't mean they're going to evolve exactly like Earth.
Yeah.
They have different environmental conditions that have
Sci-fi.
affected their development and growth. They have different materials within their access that we don't on our planet, because each planet out there is not... Each Earth-like planet isn't as Earth-like as that sounds. The statement Earth-like does not mean Earth clone. It means there's a planet that can sustain life, but it might develop a little differently. I mean, their physiology was different, so there's obviously different elements that affect them that way. So that's why, I felt like people that complaining about that, they were kind of looking for the reason to not like the show, and so...
I think a lot of people that like complain about that mostly just think of observation as seeing with your eyes. And it's like, yeah, if we all saw an explosion from our back patio, most of us aren't going to be able to calculate anything, right? Like if I saw this war battle that was like depicted in the episode, it's like there's no way I would be able to go, oh, that's spaceships. I know how to come up with warp theory. But like there is a guy, there is a girl, there is somebody in this world that is
there's a
on
whole
the
bunch of
verge,
satellites.
and they just need a little bit of like confirmation. And yeah, that's not even mentioning all of the observation tools, like somebody like Galileo, or not Galileo, the Newton. It was an apple, and suddenly he was like, oh, that's why the apple falls and tumbles.
How does
There's
this
a
happen
force,
anyway?
right? And that's what like we're ignoring when they say, oh yeah, it was observation. Yeah, observation with satellites, observation with camcorders, observation with magic things
All
that
kinds
we
of sensor
can't
data.
describe in terms of satellite technology recording devices. Like they mess with the high fidelity of their scans by literally changing the frequency of the photo they're taking. Like I don't know what that is.
All right,
I'm
we
not
do have
even
a writer
photographer.
comment in the chat. Hey there, Corione sent me from the Orville Nation. Well, hey there, Orville Nation. Welcome to the discussion. Great name for your channel. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We kind of came up with that ourselves and have decided to stick with it because that's pretty straightforward. But most all of us here are writers or aspiring writers in one form or another. So
I should check out your channel. I've seen it on another stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't actually gone looked yet, but
And honestly, guys, thank you very much for showing up. I appreciate it. And pull up a chair, guys.
absolutely, we're actually about to finish up our Strange New Worlds discussion because we are almost an hour into the show, and we kind of see. And I knew this show was going to do it too. That's why I was like, you know what? Let's just keep it to 2 segments because Star Trek is a lot to unpack. I will finish by saying, like I said, I really liked it. I think it's off to a strong start. Yes, it still references Discovery. It is what it is. If you don't want to like it for that reason, that's acceptable. It's just, I think we should really give this show a chance because I think this is going to be the show that finally reaches those other Discovery diehard fans and gets them to go, hey guys, maybe learn a little tolerance, learn a little more inclusion. Respect the fact that other fans, OG fans, are going to have their reasons for not liking the show, and it's not going to be because of your favorite buzzword. It's going to be because they just don't like the show for the reason. And so I want to get to a point where I would rather have multiple Star Trek shows on, and we can figure out which ones we like and which ones we don't like. And then we can have proper Trek disagreements like we did back in the 90s. You know, when both TNG and DS9 were on, there was a big rivalry there. When both DS9 and Voyager were on, there was, a bunch of rivalry there. Granted, this was before Twitter and all that, so the discussion wasn't as, wasn't much further than the water cooler at your place of work. But now, since technology has gone so much, it's, I'll get another comment in the chat from Samuel Mum. Someone shared your stream with me on Twitter and it shows unavailable. Settings?
Weird.
Do we want to check that real quick?
Question mark. I have it up on 3 different streams right now, and it is
Yeah,
currently
I've got
working.
it. It's working. I don't know if we're maybe... you know what? Thank you for bringing this up, Samuel Mum. We will check if our regional settings are bad, because maybe this is not available in your area for one of those stupid reasons. If that's the case, you can go over to twitch.com/The Writer Brothers. We are simulcasting there right now, too. So if that works better
Link
for you.
in the comments at the top.
Huh?
Link in the comments at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll, or if you just
No,
want
I
to repost
did.
it,
I
we'll do
already
that
put
too.
the link in the comments.
So yeah, we do. We'll have to look into that. I didn't even think of that. The regional availability. Duh. Maybe that's why we're not growing an audience. we're only available in the United States and Canada.
I mentioned this last time, but there is actually in the YouTube terms, you have to get to 1,000 subscribers before they start. They cap your streams until you hit that mark.
Yeah.
That will be
wow.
that'll be a challenge until you reach that point. But
Well, yeah. Hopefully we can get that figured out by our next show. But like I said, we do have Twitch as well, which they have probably been the best place to stream. Actually, they've given us like no grief whatsoever for our streaming, and almost makes me want to go exclusive. Let's see. There's a lot of differing opinions out there on stream. Yes, and Orville Nation, that's exactly what I love about this show so far, and I think that's why it's a good sign, is the fact that I myself, like I said earlier when I gave my reasoning, I do not like Discovery. I think Season 1 is worth watching once, and that's it. Otherwise, they did a very good job of recapping all the stuff that happened with Pike in this episode, and I felt that really played a great job into really giving us Pike as his own character this time, not just kind of shoehorned in with Season 2 of Discovery. I did not watch Season 3 or 4 of Discovery. I will likely never watch Season 3 or 4 of Discovery. And I only watched the first season of Puke Hard, and I will not watch Season 2. The only reason I will watch Season 3 is if they specifically say that they are not going to acknowledge the last 2 seasons. I don't need some big canon explanation, wormhole stuff that removes it from canon or any of that stuff. Just if they completely ignore what happens in Season 1 and 2 of Puke Hard, I will give Puke Hard Season 3 a try. Anyone got any final discussion while I get set up for our next segment?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. I'll go.
All right.
Yeah, I would just say, like, I think out of all the... If you take a look at every Star Trek premiere, because I did that right before I watched Strange New Worlds, is I watched every single first episode of every series going on. This is by far, even with the stuff that really irked me, this is by far not nearly the worst opening. I think we can all agree that some of the first episodes of some of the Star Trek series are just rough.
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I felt Encounter at Farpoint was probably the weakest.
I agree.
You know, Broken Bow is not much higher up.
Definitely
but then
not.
there are better too, because I mean, I felt that the Emissary was absolutely fantastic. I felt like this was maybe on par with like the Caretaker, the Voyager opening. So, you know, I do think it's worth giving a try. I mean, if we were willing to give Voyager a try with the opening that the Caretaker gave us, we should be willing to give this a try and see where they take it. They may take it off a cliff. They may take it to somewhere special. There's only really one way to find out.
Yep, exactly. And that's why I'm going to give it a shot, because it's not, like I said, Star Trek kind of gets that 3-season rule, and I think we can do, you know, especially with these production values, about the 3 or 4 episodes. This episode has earned a pass from me for now. So if there is a bad episode this season, I might, you know, we'll rip it apart here for sure, but I might overlook it. Let's see. Samuel Norm says, my 5 cents. Strange New Worlds is a nice show, but since when do Vulcans have sex lives besides Ponfar? Okay. That is one issue I do want to bring up as a counterpoint, devil's advocate. I will say, so there's one thing that stood out to me that I noticed when this was brought up, because I watched it twice. It's the fact that there are no humans present when they're being a little more loose and a little more emotional. And I think that's so we'll see if this holds up, because only time will tell with this series. Because if you notice, Spock does, when he gets the call, sure, he's not dressed, but for some reason answering the call was more important to him in that moment than putting on a shirt, and he should have. But he was still professional about it regardless. Pike is like, Spock, are you naked? I am not, sir. He snaps back into Spock mode that we're used to. And so we'll see if they actually do that. We'll see if what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, here is what the Vulcans look like with their hair down when no other species are around. Because I could totally buy into their culture being one of, this is what we look like when we are around other species, and then we can kind of be a little bit more, human, so to speak, when no one else is around. But we will see what happens. Samuel Mum says, besides that detail, I really enjoyed the Strange New World pilot, and I like the new old mission of the week approach. Yes, absolutely, 100%. That is exactly what I'm looking forward to. I think DS9 did it best when they had, you had your mix of overarching continuity plot, and then you had your episode, your bad guy of the week, so to speak. And I think that's a good formula, and I hope they do that with this one. And I do hope it sticks out as its own thing. So, okay, thanks. I do like it when people agree with me. That's not required to participate in the show, but it is appreciated. But all right, final thoughts before we move on.
Orville Nation, I am still concerned about these writers, how 3 Starfleet officers get convinced to leave their ship, and why are there only 3 officers on the Archer? And
again, going back to the technology thing, that one was a bit much to swallow, I'll agree. Seeing how automated our society has become, though, I don't buy with our current 21st century, 2022 technology where ships are basically driving themselves now. I could see them having a ship that's so automated that you would only need 3 people to hang out on it. And that ship would literally operate mostly in the internals of Starfleet, just kind of doing, hey, we're going to go here. Oh, hey, a quick first contact introduction. That's what you would send your small ship to do in a planet that's within the Federation that hasn't hit warp drive yet. Because they're in more of a controlled environment. Whereas the Enterprise is going out and venturing outside of Starfleet's borders. My understanding was that this planet was deep within Federation territory, and they hadn't evolved yet, and so when they detected, oh, hey, they have warp now, that's when they sent the little 3-man envoy to go handle that. But that's just my explanation. Yeah, and again, I'm not...
I've got
go
an
ahead,
idea
carry
on that, too. I actually thought of, when I watched it, my theory was, well, they just realized these guys have warp, within, a very short amount of time, and went, oh, who have we got lying around the starbase that we can send that knows first contact protocol? You 3? Okay, yeah. Take this ship that we just refurbished and go. We don't have a lot of time. We want to make sure we encounter them on their homeworld as they're testing warp drive, not out in space somewhere where it could be a random encounter that no one's counting on. So there is a way that would make sense where it's just a rush job. Like, everybody kind of got caught with their pants down in this situation. And that's actually why they needed the Enterprise, because everything went wrong because they did not prepare well for the mission.
Yeah.
I mean, that even kind of makes sense with stuff that happened within the episode, because they talk about, they make the point of when they arrive and they're able to look at them and observe them shortly. They're like, well, this doesn't make sense. They're not at this point. How do they have a warp drive? They should not have been able to build this, period. What is going on? And it only is after, several, I forget what the character's name, but the one character's like, we should put our shields on. This is weird.
Chief.
We should put our shields up. And they're like, no, that's silly. It's like, you should put your shields up. And they put them up, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we just got shot. Maybe this isn't a warp drive. Oh, it's a bomb. So that could make sense within that, because they wouldn't have been anticipating it to be a bomb. They weren't anticipating that planet to have a warp drive. They still would have figured they were still out a ways before they should even have one. So that could even make sense within what you're saying there. That whole thought behind it.
I suspect we could go on quite a while on this episode, because I've got 20 other things to mention.
I've had thoughts all this whole time that have been stewing.
Well, then I do have some good news for everybody. We are going to be discussing Strange New Worlds every week, because I am happy to follow this show. I'm happy to keep my well, I don't know about happy to keep my Paramount Plus subscription, but I'll, keep it
Have a
begrudgingly.
justification for once.
What?
Have a justification for once.
Right, because, oh man, does Halo suck.
I know. I've
I haven't
watched every
watched it.
episode.
So yes, and the Orville, when the Orville hits, we will be doing that as well. So that is absolutely on. Yes, the real Star Trek series is absolutely on the menu. So now we are going to transition. I know Curion and John, you guys were scared to death if we could even have a show anymore without an Apple product. This week I found a way. I don't know if we're gonna find one next week.
An apple a day keeps
An
the
Apple,
bots
yes, an
away.
Apple product a day keeps the wallet at bay. Actually keeps the wallet empty.
Justifies me paying for it.
Foundation was a book originally written by Isaac Asimov. If you're not familiar with some of his works, he also wrote I, Robot, which is another favorite movie of mine. I do need to read the book, and we will be doing I, Robot on a future show. Most definitely, because I do love that film. However, we are here to talk about Foundation, one of his most well-known books in the sci-fi community, and how Apple TV managed to adapt it from the book to the show. Corion, with you being kind of our sci-fi, when it comes to the books, the bay of knowledge, so to speak, or if there's a term in your specific faith that we could use and that would be appropriate. Point being, you know a lot about the books, and you've read a lot of sci-fi books, and one of the reasons why I'm happy to do this show is because now I'm reading sci-fi books that I blew off as a kid because, well, reading was stupid. But now I'm looking forward to reading more books, and I've read this book before I even did this show, and now I've recently watched this show. Why don't you go ahead and feed some context? How well does this follow the book, and does it also reference the other books in the series, or is it just the first one so far?
So far, what I have seen of the Foundation TV series is it's primarily focusing on the first book. The first book...
Sorry to interrupt real quick. We do have another guest arrival, Maria with Tea and Telly, who I have
awesome.
also subscribed to as well. It's awesome. We are very glad to have you here. I've been following a little bit of your work, so I'm very grateful to see you on our channel. Thank you for dropping in. Anyway, sorry, Curion.
Yeah, so first, Maria, you and I need to get together at some point and do a thing together. But anyway, so, I mean, Foundation at its core is a story about kind of the last archivist in the last society that the universe is going to see. And he's trying to make sure that data, that information, that knowledge, that wisdom is preserved in some fashion to serve as a foundation for future cultures. And, this primarily focuses on the first book. I have seen hints from future books down the road, but nothing that really spoke to me. Yes, this is, from the third book of the Foundation trilogy. I haven't seen anything there, but there are some hints towards it, which, I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've read Foundation. It wasn't exactly my favorite of the classics, but, it definitely is up there. So what I would say is the first 2 episodes followed fairly closely to the book, and then they kind of started to deviate. And I guess the way I like to explain it is it's kind of like watching somebody fall asleep at the wheel on the highway. Like, when somebody starts nodding, they start kind of drifting a little bit in the lane, and you start getting concerned about them. But by like episode 5 and 6, by the episode after 6, they just ignored the road and started blazing their own trail.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, they're off the road. They're driving through the ditch now. They've completely gone past the rumble strip. They're off on their own thing. They're gonna wake up in a national park at some point, I'm pretty sure. But until then, that's kind of where I'm seeing it. Is this is one of those classic sci-fi stories that really begs the question of, if it was the end of the world, or you knew the end of the world was coming, what information would you want to make sure gets into the hands of the next people, right? What would you want to do to make sure that they know what you know, what the really important things are, right? There's a great line in Babylon 5 where they're talking about why they went up into space in the first place, and it's because eventually our star will die, and when it dies, you know, Marilyn Monroe is gone, right? You know, the Beatles' music is gone, right? Mozart, Bach, what have you, they will all be gone and they will never be remembered by anyone. And that's why they went to the stars, is to kind of give that culture almost an immortality. And that's what I feel like Foundation was trying to kind of put forward, is what pieces of our culture would you want to make sure were preserved, so that long after we are gone and, you know, some other species discovers Earth, what would you want them to know about us? What would you stick in that time capsule to encompass all of human knowledge and evolution? And that's at its core what Foundation is about, and the politics of that, and whose opinions matter more about what would go into that kind of a time capsule, that kind of archive. Which I think is a fascinating book. I really wasn't sure how they were going to turn that into a dramatic story, but you know what? I've got a lot of respect now for Apple as a producer of good storytelling. And, you know, for the first couple of episodes, they were doing it. They were really keeping it on an interesting take on the data. It's afterwards, like it's after that, those 5 or 6 episodes, that things started really going off the rails and just going into weird places that I can't follow it. It's gone to a place where I can't follow now. So there you go for your I guess archivist of the channel.
Yeah, the primary.
Our encyclopedia.
Our knowledge base for when it comes to good book recommendations. Which we'll definitely be doing the Forever War at some point very soon, and I'm looking forward to that. We got another bot in the chat. If y'all are looking for porn, that's pretty easy to find. I don't know why these bots come in here and do this shit. Someone mentioned Elon sending a rocket with all these books. I think it was Samuel Mumm, and yeah, that's basically the premise of Foundation. The book itself is absolutely worth reading. Forewarned, it is very dry. This is kind of more of Asimov's. Asimov is kind of more of that conceptual writer. He does sci-fi concepts. He focuses more on the idea, and not so much on the character development. And so when I watched the first episode, which I was enamored with how much was pulled from that first chat for the first part of the story. It was so good. And yes, don't worry, Samuel Mumm, the naked troll, it's not real. It can't hurt you. And so, sorry, I got to remember how to balance comments and conversation at the same time. Still working on my own process here. So I was very interested. I liked some of the creative changes that they took. I liked that they took Gale from being the audience character and actually made the character into something else, and actually made the character actually someone that was more interesting to follow. So I was not bothered by what they did with that character. I also liked what they did with the concept of the Emperor, making the Emperor a continuous line that rules by constant succession of the same person. That Cleon the First, basically reigns forever through the process of cloning, and how they're really exploring. And I really liked the idea that they created, even just in that original idea, because that was something else that they could really explore in depth. And I liked the build-up between episode 3 and 4. Like, we're really watching this. Then we get to episode 5. And that's where the show takes a nosedive. I don't know if they fired the original writer, if they brought somebody in to do something, because it's also falling into the same formula as The Walking Dead, where it goes super intense and situation right at the end on the edge of your seat. How will they get through this? And then we get to the next episode, and then it's like kind of anticlimactic, and now it's going to be boring for the rest of the show. And then, of course, we're going to build up back to the end where it's going to get to the super, oh no, cliffhanger ending, and then it's the same thing over and over, and it's so hard to get through because they were doing such a great job with establishing, okay, this is how space works in our world. This is how things work, and this is how this. Oh, now we're gonna change that. Oh, by the way, our technology, yeah, it's 12,000 years in the future, or like 30,000 years in the future. I don't even know what their timeline is anymore. I lost track of the years, and it's like, okay, now our technology is like so hyper advanced that we can have spacesuits that do perfect infrared scans at millions of light years away, but we can't figure out how to properly water a garden because there's still wet spots all over the place. And then we have shields that can protect from literally jumping. That's not how kinetic physics work, by the way, but you know what, fine, it's sci-fi, right? We gotta have some suspension of disbelief. I don't know what happened because and then we just continue on. Now the Anacrean motivations are unclear because 1 second they're like, oh, we're gonna kill you all, and then they're like, okay, so here's what we just need your guys' help to build us a ship with warp drive, and then we're gonna leave. You guys shot down the ship that had warp drive. Well, we wanted the person on board, not their ship. It's like I've never seen a show go from doing so good to just increase into maximum stupidity so fast. Like, not we're beyond like, okay, a few idiot mistakes. Oh, we don't know what we're talking about with physics. No, this show feels like it just went intentionally bad. So, does anybody else want to get in on the rant?
Yeah. I go for it, Chris, if you have an opinion, because I'm very different, so I kind of want to hear what everybody else has to say before I merge the two.
Yeah, Chris, you didn't read the book. You have a unique perspective coming in this totally unprepared, totally outside. So please give us your fresh take on the show.
I have zero notion of what they changed from the book or what they didn't change from the book, and I'll quickly mention one of my favorite television shows in recent years was the 12 Monkeys adaptation, which completely, as Corian said, went off the road and blazed its own trail. And I loved it just the same. It even had a gender swap. I still loved it. So I can go into an open mind with that perspective, but I have no idea what they might have changed. And it seems like there was three principal storylines here. There was obviously Harry with the fate versus predetermination, which I would love to see explored more. And I mean, especially after those first two episodes, it just kind of seemed like they moved off and introduced a whole new cast of characters and whole new ideas. And I was wanting more of that Harry storyline, and I don't know if it's in the books or not, but I stopped getting it. And I was like, oh, now they're going on to this thing about the Terminus planet, and I didn't really care about any of the characters or what was happening there. It just kind of bored me half to death. I wanted to just stop. But I also loved the storyline with the Empire, and I love Lee Pace and the way he portrayed that character. So I was also interested in watching that play out. But it's like every time they went back to Terminus, I was just like, oh, everything to do with that. So I don't know if that was part of the original book or whether it felt like it was a completely different TV show every time they went over.
No. Terminus is an integral part of the overall Foundation story. That's why it's so. Oh, we got another bot in the chat. Please nuke. That's why it's just it's so disappointing the direction that the show went. And like I said, the creative changes that you could make weren't such a big deal because, like I said, it's a concept novel anyway. So adding the drama of the backstory to Gale and creating that whole thing, I think it really helped the story overall, at least to start. But, man, they just went off the rail. Not just in story, but just even in storytelling. Real quick, Samuel Mum says, may I share a German author whose early work is really good? I'm going to probably butcher this. Andreas Eschbach. I hope I said that correctly. I think the novel is titled The Carpet Makers. We can definitely
he was
look into
correct.
that.
It is
What?
the title. He is correct. It is the Carpet Makers. Pretty sure
Oh,
the
have you
name's
read
right.
it?
I don't know for sure. Yeah, I just looked it up after he had messaged about it. It looks like a very interesting story about a plant where they create or weave elaborate rugs out of human hair, and it takes a lifetime of work to complete. And so I guess the story is generally about this world. I don't want to give any spoilers. I am looking at the plot summary.
Yeah,
but-
no, I mean, we could definitely look into it.
But
I mean,
no,
we're
it
probably,
looks
I think we're the
interesting for
only
sure.
show right now that's actually actively doing books on a fairly regular basis, and we kind of try to do one every at least couple of weeks, or we don't like to go more than 3 weeks without a book mention. But it is something we're getting more into our rhythm of, because it does, the only downside with books is it will take us a little while to get to those recommendations because your average audiobook is at least 10 hours long. Sometimes
I
even at
use
double
free
speed it can be 10
tokens.
hours. So we definitely appreciate the suggestion, and we will absolutely look into that. That just adds more. Also, Shuinator, I think, or no, Sushiinator. There, I can read. Welcome to the discussion. See you all are having fun talking to each other in the chat, which is great. We love seeing people come here and have fun and talk, and we'll try to keep an eye out and see if you guys have any ideas you want to contribute, of course. All opinions are welcome, whether they be opinions we like, dislike. We don't. We're about restoring respect into discourse at the Writer Brothers. That's our kind of our primary main objective overall, but also to have a good time and have a talk sci-fi. Well, not just sci-fi, but shows, movies, games, shows, books. We do it all. So getting back to the Foundation, it's really sad to see just something like this, because the concept itself you could have just kept to while still doing your creative liberties. And I think the part that really just got me to look to I paused it several times throughout episode 5, and I looked over at my wife, and I'm just like, what is happening here? Like when the barrier goes down and all of the Anacreans start rushing in, shooting, and they can't hit a damn thing.
Right. It's like stormtroopers.
No, stormtroopers aren't even that bad. This is just, again, back to maximum stupidity here. And then
You-
they
you
shoot the
think they
ship
would've hit
down,
by
and they have enough
accident
time
at
to
least
run from
once.
one balcony through the tower all the way to the other side
Probability.
to watch it fall to the ground.
My initial thought was, are they trying not to hit the residents because that's their intention is not to hit them? And then I saw that they were actually shooting them later, and I was like, oh, okay.
And thank you for the nice thought, Orville Nation. And yeah, Maria says, I am a book lover, so always tend to always like the books more. And yes, so far I think that's pretty much where we're at with the book. I think the only exception, not necessarily better, where the book was right there with the show so far as adaptation goes, would be Amazon's Reacher adaptation. The book and the show are both amazing. We actually did do a bit about that on one of our previous episodes. I'll probably put that into its own little cut later on. But yeah, no, we books. So I guess with the new viewers here, I'm just going to take a quick second to break the conversation for a quick little second, explain a little bit about what we are. Books are the foundation. They are the core of our storytelling. See what I did there? They are the core of our story. That's where all of our stories, after the first story that was told by the campfire was told, and the first time pen and paper came along, we were finally able to write down our stories and ideas. So they are absolutely a kind of a lost appreciation, so to speak. Audiobooks, and Audible in particular, has done a very good job of bringing them to life through different forms of audiobooks, whether it just be dry reads like the one for Foundation, or audio plays, which can be more exciting for some people who are a bit more auditory when it comes to appreciating a story. So we do like to do discussions here for that. We absolutely appreciate any recommendations on stuff. Corey Owen's been like I said, he's been the one who's had some good ideas. Starship Troopers we also did. Fantastic book. Really made me hate the movie. I still love the movie by itself, separated from the book. But man, talk about cultural vandalism.
Yeah, I have a theory
okay.
about the movie and book. I feel like the movie was made so that Heinlein would spin in his grave so fast You could use it as a power source for faster than light travel.
Sorry, comment in the chat from Orville Nation. Maria really likes books. She does entire videos of her caressing books, guys. Just an FYI. Okay, yeah, see, if I could have that here in place of my poster right there, you know, just yeah, having Maria present, like, the book, that'd be hilarious. Have a little animation of her just, here it is. This is what we're talking about. But of course, that's only going to
Maria,
happen so
are you
often.
interested in doing any, like, Vanna White walk-ons holding books? Like, you know,
Right. Yeah, Maria, if you have the capability, we might bring you on one of our future shows sometime. Yes, and now I want sushi too. Sushi-nator. Sushi-nator, I'm assuming that means that you're a connoisseur of sushi, which I guess...
That or he's a Terminator made out of sushi.
A Terminator made out of sushi.
I choose to believe in John's headcanon.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Sushi
What?
Man.
Ah.
Yes.
Keep buying old Star
Dude,
Trek novels. I haven't read the 90s ones, so cheap. Yeah. No, good, good. Maria, are you referring to me when you say PJ?
No, PJ is Orville.
Oh, that's right. PJ
I've
is
caught
Orville.
on.
Thank you.
I've been reading
So I keep
these
seeing it and I keep forgetting
closely.
that. So, anyway, who wants to take over the discussion on Foundation, the TV series?
Brandon, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yes,
before
Brandon,
I
please.
rant.
So I'll be honest. Leading up to today, it was only a couple days ago that I realized Foundation was part of today. I knew about the Star Trek show, so I only got 2 episodes in. Also, I have a weird bit of knowledge only from a previous conversation I had with John, where we just talked about some of the premises of the show and the general, like, some of the ideas behind it. He brought it up to me knowing that it was probably something I'd be interested in, and I very quickly was able to start seeing some of the things we talked about. For example, some of the cloning with the Emperor, which is incredibly interesting.
Absolutely.
The Dawn Dustin Day. So far I'm liking it. Trying to get my thoughts together here because I've been kind of sitting there thinking about stuff. I definitely kind of get what Chris was saying in regards to like, I'm not even technically to Terminus yet in the show, only the ship headed to Terminus, and there was some aspects with it where it was like some of the stuff made sense and I could understand like where it was going, and then other things that was happening and it was like, this feels like it's just happening to be happening to show a pattern but not necessarily adding anything to it. The ending of episode 2 really like caught me off guard. Like, it was like I just didn't see that event happening when it did. I was just like, oh, okay, so you just, okay, where are we going with this? Like, where are you headed here? I also haven't read the book. I technically would be slightly less knowledgeable than Chris because I've seen less episodes. I don't know if that helps me or not, but
Well, you can still...
there's just interesting things in it. Like,
Yeah.
like, so far the overarching story that I've been you know, kind of following, I'm less interested in, and more some of like the stories weaved into it. Like, there's spots like, for example, I like that from the get-go, from the moment you're introduced to the Emperor for the first time, it's made very clear the kind of man he is. He, like, they don't, like, it's not this big intrigue situation at a table or anything. It's him approaching a man, cleaning this type of painting, asking him questions, and then just destroys him on the spot. And is like, yeah, you won't ever have to worry about it again, and you won't talk again, because you won't be around to talk. Like, it makes it clear in that moment. So in episode 2, when he then hangs multiple people, it tracks. It makes sense that man came to this decision, like, to this point at least, you know, at this point in the show. Like, they set these characters up and very well as far as trying to show some of like how they are and how they're functioning, if that makes sense. It's unfortunate that I had to watch it while also working. I wish I could put more input. I will say on a different note, because my brain works in terrible ways, as far as sci-fi is concerned, one story that I really liked that they made a movie for, and if I recall, I relatively enjoyed the movie, and if I recall at the time, it was one of the best examples of a book to a movie, was Ender's Game.
Yes.
But, dude, I loved that book. That book was... And if I were... Like, and it's just jumping from memory, but if I recall, it was, especially at that time, the best example of, like, see, just because a book existed before doesn't mean you have to brutalize it. You can kind of follow what they were trying to do. But that will go on another different direction, because I actually have a decent foundation for that discussion as far as knowledge. I mean, I'm liking Foundation so far. As said before, though, I'm episode 2. I haven't made it to 5, and just listening to you describe a shield drop and no one can hit anything, that already sounds awful. Like, I haven't seen it, and it sounds terrible. I can picture it, and I don't like it.
Well, and
here's
Go ahead,
what I
carry
would
on.
say. If
Actually,
I know you haven't-
real quick, I do want to shout out to Maria. Did say that I just spread the word on this stream because you guys are great. Maria, thank you so much for that. We are on. This is actually our 13th broadcast for this show, so we are very grateful for any support, any getting the word out, because we do love doing this. Just having the discussion, having people show up and participate, even regardless of if you guys are here to hang out with us or even chat amongst yourselves about this stuff. We love it. We want to get people thinking. We want to get people contributing in one form or another. So Orville Nation, thank you so much as well. Anyone who's helping us grow this stream, we greatly appreciate it. We do also have Patreon and stuff that we can add later, but we're okay financially at the moment. We're not that desperate yet. But we do eventually want to continue to grow slowly, and that can take time. And that doesn't happen without people like you helping us, fellow independent content creators. And this is probably a discussion we might have on a future show, just in the general grand scheme and future of independent content. But I do think that we are the future overall. I think we are the audiences that as we grow and as ideas expand, people are going to realize that, certain ideas that are being pushed in New Trek, for example, I don't always agree with, but I do agree with and support with them having their ideas and sharing them. And I think it's important that we exchange those ideas, whether they're good or bad, because that's what keeps us free as just even as a species in general, is the free flow of information. And I like talking sci-fi. I like talking Star Trek. I like talking shows and movies. So it works out. Anyway. Sorry to ruin your... Oh, yeah, carry on. You actually had a thought to respond to Brandon. Go ahead.
So, DC, I just wanted to say a couple of things real quick. If you have not read a lot of Asimov, but you like the idea of books that present a concept and then try to build the logic behind the concept, Asimov as a writer is definitely for you. He is definitely, out of the giants of Western sci-fi, the idea guy, right? He's the guy that comes up with this crazy notion of, I'm going to build a series of laws for robots so they can't possibly hurt us. And then he goes through how to break them, right? He goes, what information would I want to pass on to the next generation? And then extrapolate that out into, what would I want the next civilization to understand, right?
Well, Sorry, go ahead.
He is the idea guy. I 100% recommend checking him out. I'm also going to shout out another author just real quick, which is, if you like stories with interesting premises that take you on a really good adventure and that will keep you hooked, check out Larry Niven. He is your guy if you want weird space engineering plus really cool ideas for plots. So and we can definitely, like I said, I've really enjoyed, honestly, again, sorry to break from the conversation a little bit, although it does seem we don't have a lot of nice things to say about Foundation overall.
Oh, I do. I've just been waiting for everybody to get their bad things out.
John, I'll definitely let you get that chance. I do just want to say, I've actually really started to enjoy the book stuff more often. I really like that we do the book material like this, and especially since there's so much out they're okay. Especially since there's so much out there to
Literally
read
at your
and to
house.
really, and especially like that's the other reason I really want to grow this channel is I also want to start promoting other unknown authors. You actually might know one of them.
Well, how can they be unknown if
This
we know
fedora-wearing dork named P.D. York wrote a book too. Original sci-fi conspiracy thriller novel. But it's not just me I want to promote and get my stuff out there. It's also everybody else. All the other authors. Will Jordan, a.k.a. The Critical Drinker. His work is worth noting outside of his reviews. But even other people I've started to meet through the different social networking channels. There's other books and content that I do want to review. It's just, you know, we're a little small right now.
We're gonna get
We're
there.
getting there.
Honestly, the whole
But-
point of this series is for us to get to our favorite things. So we'll
Yeah,
get to the
exactly.
new stuff
But it's kind of hard to help promote those little guys while being a little guy ourselves. That's the only point I'm
Well,
trying to get. So yes, we
my-
want to do
my
more
best
original
friend has
content
hundreds
because
of
I think
books,
we need
so
to get
I
more
should
of those
do it.
original books and those original stories out there for everyone to see. So that's also another thing we're trying to do. Sushi, I
I'm
saw
gonna
that
reply.
you subscribed,
I'm gonna-
or I didn't see that you subscribed. You said you subscribed. It didn't pop up in my feed, so I apologize for not getting to it. Anybody who subscribed within the last hour of this show, I guess there's something in our settings we've got to double check. Thank you so much. Again,
thank
this
you.
is what helps us
I'm
to
gonna-
grow as a community. But go ahead, John.
I'm gonna respond to Sushi Naders. I stumbled across Asimov way back. Where should one start if you buy a book and read? I love the promo and feel to support it. Love it. Thank you, Sushi Nader. My response is I really enjoyed the Audible book that was reorganized to follow Apple's intention for this series that is Foundation. Because the only things that I didn't like about the show is that A, it's not over, and B, it felt like some of the things didn't connect to anything that I had read about yet. And it didn't dawn on me until we started the episode that the book that I listened to on Audible that was, in conjunction with Apple TV, that it was it was reorganized because at some points I would be on chapter 3 and then I'd be on chapter 17 and then I'd be on chapter 21, and I couldn't figure it out until after we started talking and I started realizing that maybe they'd done that, and that's what the promo for the book was. But anyway, the way that they redid the book on the Audible story made me love the show even more despite its differences, because the way the Audible story opens up is with the similar first 2 episodes, but then it just ignores Gale. It just ignores Holden.
So
And
I can speak to Gale real quick, actually, if you don't mind.
yeah, for sure.
Gale is actually just a placeholder character. Gale's purpose in the book is to just be the audience to get to know Harry, and that's the only purpose Gale serves. And that was the like I said, this goes back to Asimov being a conceptual writer, not so much a character writer. So that's why I did like the changes that they made to Gale's character. But yeah, I was just explaining that.
Yeah, no, and that's more my point, is that the differences between the book and the show are so much respectable, especially when it comes to the fact that a lot of the things that psychohistory in the book alludes to is that you can't predict one person, and it really takes the time to say that one person. It doesn't necessarily mean one person's one action in the grand scheme. It means one person. And so when the show changed the genders of the two main characters of the first segment, it's literally like maybe the first hour and a half of the 4 hours if you're listening to the book on 2.5 times speed, which is what I did. So it could have literally only been an hour and a half of the 8-hour segment or 2 hours of the 8-hour segment, not sure. But the story of Terminus as a whole, the story of the Anacrean Empire joining in, the story of the Empire doesn't exist at all in the Foundation. Like the book,
not to the
the
detail,
Foundation,
no.
it never talks about Empire. It doesn't talk about any of the genetic cloning, especially not at scale like it does in the show.
Yeah, so I gotta clear that up just a little bit. The concept of Empire is a totally new idea that was made for the show. That was not Asimov's original story, actually. So that is where I give the show praise, is the fact that they came up with the idea of the continuous cloning generations of keeping the same emperor. So that's
I loved
that makes
that.
that makes the
sure.
show and every
Yeah,
little
it's a good
element of
aspect.
the show not only be completely authorized to maintain its deviation, but also still within canon of Harry Seldon's psychohistory. Like he talks about statistical analysis a lot, and he says that like at the end of the day, you cannot guess the end of the day.
Yeah.
But you can get really close, and that's what the whole book is about, and that's why I recommend the book so much now.
Yeah.
Especially this Audible version, because the way it ended, it didn't. I so felt like there were so many more great stories to come, and the way that it was read and told just it flowed so nicely and so comfortably. But watching the show, I watched it all, every single episode in a row a couple days ago, and I loved it. I thought it was so fun, and sure, it didn't follow Asimov perfectly, but it also didn't disrespect Asimov at any point, because Asimov's story was like, I don't know how they're gonna get to this, what they call it, a Seldon event, but there's gonna be a Seldon event, and it needs to be responded to, and there is one. There's a Seldon event at the end of the season, and it's in conjunction with the first Seldon event. So seasons 2 and 3, which really, if they're going to keep with the books, there's only 2 or 3 more seasons to come with this one book. And in those 2 more Seldon events, like the show really took what Isaac Asimov really offered, which was you explain how they got there as long as they got there.
Yeah, and
they did.
Yeah, and I want to clear up too. If the execution of episode 5, 6, and I think 7's as far as I've gotten, if the way that they went about that, if that was a few executional hiccups and it recovers by the end, then we'll see, and I could probably give a better response in that area. And I don't mind that it deviates too hard off of the original story. It's just, honestly, it's the stupidity that we're suddenly, we kind of wrote ourselves into a corner here, but we're gonna have 40 Anacrean troops storm this facility, and they can like barely hit one person. Come on. Oh man. And let's see. Orville Nation said casting was pretty good in the show too. Yes, 100% agree. Everybody who was cast, I mean, the person that plays Harry Seldon is perfectly cast. And I especially loved his work in The Expanse, too. So, yes, very good actor, very good choice there. I do also like Salvo Hardin in this show. I mean, that is a big character deviation from the original Hardin, but I liked what they were doing overall.
My problems with the character deviation was more in their rank and stature within the society. Salvo Hardin really felt more like an outsider, whereas in the story, even though it was a gender swap in the story, Salvo Hardin is the mayor. And those kinds of things kind of disappointed me. Is like Isaac Asimov took a lot of time when developing his hierarchy of authority, and the fact that they just changed it up to warden to different things. Also, at the point of the story, there's supposed to be 100,000 people that started on Terminus, and there was 1 million by the time Salvo Hardin was in charge as mayor, as mayor, and then took over from the board. But like again, the difference is still respect Asimov in terms of them being, well, what if it was a harder start than he had theorized? And that's what his story really gives room to, especially with this show. I don't think that 5, 6, and 7 were so much of a derision or I feel like it was more of a slowdown. Like, let's get to know the people in this society so we can really understand this society. But towards the end, picks itself right back up. It jumps right back to where it left you off at that like high climax point. I think one of the things it kind of glosses over with the Anacreans, or at least the show should have taken more time to explain, especially once they started the Anacreans' motivation for warfare. Like, they changed that entirely, because the Anacreans, they weren't necessarily as pissed with the Empire as originally thought. It really, in terms of why the Empire fell in the books, is just, human failure. Right, they got complacent and they maintained all of the complacent structures and failed to actually understand anything. And the book takes a lot of time to explain how bad that gets over thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was something that the show missed. But at the same time, they could have taken the time to explain that the Anacreans that were on the main world, like doing the fighting, they weren't warriors of Anacreon. They were literally just people that joined what was left of the Anacreon military to be anything other than a dying person of cancer on a mostly nuked world. And I feel like that would explain why they missed so bad. Is like, once you finally start pointing at a person, it's a lot harder than anybody ever thought. But then that also goes to explain the Huntress. And I feel like that was something that they needed to do a little bit more of explaining. Like, it is a known fact among historical, like people who do historians of wars, they know for a fact that people didn't like to actually shoot at people in World War II, but the majority of the public don't think that's true anymore, because we've all watched enough war movies to believe most people will be warriors in a time of war.
That was the part that confused me when I was watching that episode in particular, because that segment of the show, it seemed, at least in my mind, and I don't know if I misread this, but it seemed to heavily allude to the fact that the Anacreon, if I'm saying that correctly, Anacreons.
Anacreon, yeah.
That certainly when they were talking to their leader, I got this heavy sense like they weren't actually there to hurt the colonists of Terminus. They were saying, like, don't attack us, don't fight us, and we won't fight you. You're not our enemy. And I don't know if I misread that, but then I got confused because, at the end of the day, it was like, watch your society burn like ours did. And on the one hand, I'm wondering, like, do I give credit to the writers that they were missing on purpose at the start, and then the Terminus colonists actually started firing back and hitting them, and then they started saying, okay, this is an actual fight now?
Yeah, I think it was way
was it just
closer. Like, it was supposed to be closer to a gangland skirmish. Like, the Foundation had something the Anacreons wanted, but the Foundations had, in the book it's different, but in the show, the Anacreons and the Foundation had never met, aside from the minor trading that one guy had been doing across planets. And that's where I think they failed to really explain the Anacreons. And they should have really shown the Anacreons as, like, most of the people that joined and went with the Grand Huntress were farmers, were normal folk of Anacreon, and they just got on the ship with her. And they are playing braggadocious. They are like, don't fight us or we'll kill you. But in reality, they're like, don't fight us. We don't really want to kill you.
Yeah.
I
got the sense the show was
majorly
communicating that, but it didn't extrapolate much at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's to what I'm saying about how the execution just isn't there for this sequence, because they totally miss getting that message across. And it felt like motivations were inconsistent, but not just inconsistent, but also it was one of those situations where the plan had to go this specific way in order for things to actually play out. And then it's like, on the one hand, oh yeah, we're gonna, I don't know if that was the intention of the writers to try and deceive the audience. If it was, you did a terrible job. If it wasn't, you still did a terrible job. So it was poorly executed overall to get the point across one way or the other. Because one second it's like, oh no, we just need these people to help us, then we'll kill all, or then we won't kill anybody. It's like, when you showed up in orbit, try opening with that next time. Try explaining what your plan is, then you start shooting if they don't cooperate. That was not established at all, and that's honestly what really bothered me the most, is just there's no consistency. Sushi says in the chat, I'm an old man and I like to read. Awesome. What I found about TV shows, sometimes I like my imagination better than what other people imagined. Callback Asimov, network outage, sorry. Oh yeah, no, that's you're totally fine. Any point you want to contribute to the discussion, I mean, we'll try to keep track. I mean, we're only a 2-hour show anyway, so it's not that hard to remember. Yeah, the thing is, and I agree with that, Sushi, the that's why we do these discussions, is book versus visual representation, is so that we can say, oh, did they actually do a better job of this, or did they actually capture my imagination with this? And more often than not, they do a pretty bad job. And so I will watch the rest of Foundation, at least the rest of this season. I will see how I feel by the end, and maybe we can come back to it in a later show or in preparation. I think if there is a season 2, I don't know, unless it ends after the last episode. I don't recall.
Wasn't supposed to, not even close.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
read they're doing
possibly
8
a
seasons or
future
something.
season expected in preparation for season 2, just like we're going to do in preparation for season 3 of Ted Lasso. We will have a show before those premieres where we will come back and we will discuss the Foundation again. And then if we need to start reading more books on top of it to keep up, we can also do that as well. So yeah, I think a lot of it, for me, it's the execution of some of these ideas is what didn't stick the landing, especially in episode 5 and 6. Anyone that came in, yes, obligatory like and subscribe. We also have it on the text. But thank you, Maria, for that reminder. We do appreciate it, because yes, I will admit, I'm a pretty bad self-promoter. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. I'm trying, but I got to balance a full-time job kind of a part full-time job on top of doing this stuff and this show, and I want to do more content for this channel and for my own channel. So it's life. It's how we get it going. But does anyone else have any thoughts for Foundation book v show?
I mean, I intend to watch it some more, try to catch up, if you will, to you guys.
Yeah. And
nothing else.
That's also what I wanted to say, Brandon, real quick, too. I don't want you to feel discouraged to keep watching just because I only got so far, and I was like, but at least now you're prepared. You can bust out the vodka and go, all right, yeah, let's get this crap over with.
One thing I've learned the last few years is, this last year in particular, there's a lot of movies I've gone and watched that have come out in like the last 4 or 5 years that people I heard were terrible, and then I'll watch and I was like, it may not be the best, but I enjoyed it. I don't know what people are on about. It wasn't that bad. But, I mean, I'm definitely going to probably watch more of the show. It's interesting. It has some concepts in it that I would be curious to watch to fruition. There's a few characters that I definitely have my attention. Also, to boon, I had a really lengthy conversation before I ever watched the show with John about some of the stuff that's going on, and then I extrapolated my thoughts on like what you could do with it, which I ended up finding out are things that kind of occur. So I'm curious to see some of those things like come about. It's interesting, if nothing else. Like, it's in some ways a slower burn than some shows, but it's definitely interesting. But I'm also like the odd one out here. Star Wars I liked when I was younger. I mean, I still kind of do now. And I kind of saw Star Trek, but I loved Stargate, so what's up?
Kinda like Star Wars.
Stargate.
Man, you were on our
Stargate,
show like
man.
the longest. Or not listed the longest, but you helped
As
me
a
close out that
child,
stream.
as a child to a teen, I thought Stargate was the best. Like, no joke.
Well,
Oh yeah,
Okay,
no,
bring that
I've
back.
never watched. I mean, I've watched a
They
couple
are-
episodes of Stargate, but I never got into it. I mean, the other thing is, I have a problem when I start a new show and I know it's going to end. Like I'm slow burning through Cowboy Bebop right now, and I love every
Oh, man.
episode of it. But the fact that there's only 26, I'm like, eventually that.
I'm a
gonna be
binge
over.
watcher, so like I find a show, I watch it till it's dead, and then I kind of skip on. And the problem is like what really sucks is, as mentioned previously, like I like anime among other things. I like a little bit of everything, right? For example, when we talk about books, the majority of books I've read in the past are fantasy novels. My favorite author of all time is Patrick Rothfuss, seconded by Brandon Sanderson. Very, very straight line fantasy novel individuals. Patrick Rothfuss writing the Breath of the Wind is one of my favorite books I've ever read, and I could beat a person with the thing.
Yeah.
I read it in 3 days because I was so glued to it.
All right.
All I did for 3 days.
All right, yeah, sorry to cut you off, but we are approaching
No,
the end of
you're
the line. Guys, Maria with Teen Telly, she has been fantastic. If you, especially those of you guys on the panel who don't know of her work, please check it out. Please see what she does. She definitely does a great presentation overall. We might cross the streams. Otherwise, we'll be back Tuesday with more Strange New Worlds, probably STO. My name's Petey York, host of the Ryder Brothers. Thanks. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.